Hi, my name is Tiffany Zhang, and I'm the founder and host of Empathy Gaps, an online YouTube video podcast. In today's episode, episode 3, I will be speaking with Barbara Reuer, the CEO of MusicWorx and Resounding Joy, and the past president of the American Music Therapy Association. As an avid pianist of over 10 years and a psychology enthusiast, I'd always been fascinated by the intersection of art and science. However, after watching a YouTube video, I became inspired. The video was about how a guy who was going through chemotherapy felt very anxious and nervous before his treatment, but after hearing the soothing chords and strings of a guy playing a guitar, he instantly felt more relaxed and he burst into tears. After watching this YouTube video, I realized that this is the power of music therapy that people don't realize or know about. I wanted to find someone who had the expertise and experience to discuss these topics with me, and so I contacted Dr. Reuer. In this interview, I will be discussing with Dr. Reuer about how hospitals, doctors, and nurses have adapted music therapy into clinician care, the future of music therapy, and also if music therapy can be used to alleviate the current mental health crisis. She also shares a heartwarming story about how music therapy changed a patient's life. Here is my conversation with her. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empathy Gaps, an online video podcast focused on creating a safe space to discuss mental health and psychology while also working to address the needs of the current mental health crisis. I'm Tiffany Zhang, your host, and today we have a very special guest, Barbara Reuer. Dr. Reuer is the founder and CEO of MusicWorx, a consulting agency that leads a group of music therapists, and Resounding Joy, a nonprofit that seeks to uplift others through music therapy. Additionally, Dr. Reuer was the past president of the American Music Therapy Association. In 2008, she was awarded the American Music Therapy Association National Professional Practice Award, as well as the prestigious American Music Therapy Association Lifetime Achievement Award. Dr. Reuer, thank you so much for being here today and taking the time to join me. So my first question is based on something I'm very curious about. So how do you balance between being the CEO and founder of such amazing companies and organizations and nonprofit?
It's been a journey learning how to balance that, but I work a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So because they're both, full-fledged companies, but I have a great staff on and a great team on in each company.
Mm-hmm. That's great that you have that. I think that's great what you said, and I like having like a support, kind of a supportive team around you to make sure that you are able to balance two things because I'm a high school student and I feel like sometimes I can't even balance like my 6 to 7 classes. So I feel
Yeah.
like that's great to hear that you have such a supportive team behind you. And I guess like my next question would be like, can you talk a little bit about the process of starting and establishing a company and I guess like how that differs from establishing a nonprofit?
Okay. Well, I founded MusicWorks in 1987, so it's been around now for 36 some years. And Resounding Joy, I founded in 2004, so we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. So they're different and similar, both whether it's for-profit or nonprofit. It takes a lot of work and dedication to getting those companies off the ground. With MusicWorks, we focus primarily on working with hospital contractor services out to various organizations, so hospitals, hospices, schools, substance abuse centers, eating disorders, and older adult communities. And we provide anywhere from 1 hour to 20 hours to an agency, depending on who they are and what they do. And Resounding Joy, most of that is driven by grants and individual donations, corporate and foundations. With Resounding Joy, the difference between that is how money is handled and what the obligation and fiduciary responsibilities are with that company, because it's not a company that I own. I founded it, but it belongs to the community, and therefore there's a huge responsibility when individuals donate money that you have to be accountable to and for.
Hmm. That's so interesting to hear. And I guess like kind of pivoting from companies and nonprofits to music therapy, which I know you are really established in. I guess like my question would be like, what is music therapy's impact on patients and inside clinical care, like especially regarding those with terminal illnesses as well as people who are neurodiverse? Like what would
Mhm.
the kind of
Well, I mean, music is a powerful tool. that you can use. And so many different ways that music therapists use music. Whether you're working, if you're working with a child with neurodiverse diagnoses, whether it's autism or some other rare congenital disorder, you use music with children, and especially in the school setting, to work towards communication, academic, motor, social skills, and music is the stimulus for that. And then if it's written into the child's education plan, then you try to follow those guidelines and how best to use music to generalize to their learning. If you're using music with end of life, then of course it's going to be a different approach there. It can be everything from being with the family and the individual who's passing away at that very end of life moment, or it's helping the family and the individual through maybe a legacy project or a process for that end of life moment. And it can be everything from songwriting to just making music together, to using music as the conversational focus in doing the legacy work.
Yeah, I feel like music is such a like powerful tool to bring people together, like not only for music therapy but music in general, just like bringing people together. Or like, I guess like an example would be like being in a choir, like singing with other people. Like I feel like it's definitely very uniting and stuff. And obviously I saw like one of your interviews before and how you said like music therapy is not an art but also a science. Like I think music therapy definitely like as you said, like it's not only in art but in science, but it is backed by science and research, so it has that ability to kind of, I guess, like impact those positively regarding those with illnesses as well as people who are neurodiverse. So I
Mhm.
guess my next kind of question would be like, how have hospitals, doctors, nurses, and clinicians adapted music therapy to complement their clinical care?
I don't know if they do it individually, as far as the clinical care, but our place in the
Mhm.
hospital setting, we get referrals for either pain management, anxiety, depression, even sometimes boredom as well. But usually it's for some clinical issue that's going on for the client, and so we go into the room and then work with the patient with that focus in mind. And so it
Yeah.
can be, it can be a form of expression. It can help divert the pain. We've sometimes go in and do what we call procedural support. So if there's an invasive procedure that might hurt, sometimes we'll get referrals to come in and help distract using music as the tool to
Mhm.
do that, especially if the patient has a difficult time with that procedure.
Mhm.
Very popular with little kids.
Yeah, saw on, I don't know if you've seen like the same video as me before, but I remember once I saw on YouTube there was, I can't exactly remember, but I think it was like a guy, he was going through chemotherapy, and obviously like going through chemotherapy is very tough. And he said that he was super nervous and anxious before going into like chemotherapy. And once I don't know if it was like the hospital supporting it, but there was like this musician playing guitar and he was kind of playing like a calmer song. And I guess like once hearing that song, he like burst into tears because it just like kind of, he was really anxious, but it also helped calm him down. So he was just like so moved and so touched by it that he just like started crying before chemotherapy. And I thought that that was interesting because like it really shows you how powerful music is. Like even though him just like listening to a song wasn't, I guess, like direct like intentional music therapy, it still was able to be super powerful.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
so
mean, not all people, but most people, I'd say, at least 95% of the people respond to music in some way. And usually in some positive way, if you use music appropriately for whatever area that you're trying to prescribe the music and use it for. And we have some kind of association to music, whether we're growing up, you'll at different age stages in your life, you'll have different experiences with music. And they say when working with clients that have Alzheimer's
Mhm.
and or dementia of some form, using music that they listen to and use between the ages of 18 to 26. So there's research that supports that is probably the most powerful music to use with that, because it triggers a memory that will help that client engage with the therapist or the loved one.
Hmm. That's so interesting to hear. And I guess like all of this talk about like music and like its healing and how healing it is. I know you've probably heard of the phrase music is medicine. I guess like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think music can be used as medicine, and whether it is to help calm you or help with pain management. Sometimes you don't need the pill or the medication, but the music can be the stimulus to help with that process.
Hmm. Yeah, also I've heard of another super popular phrase, music is a universal language. And I think both of those just kind of show you, I guess, like the power of music. I know it's so cliche, but like music is definitely very powerful, as well as music therapy. And I guess, like, do you believe in that, like, in some ways, music/music therapy is more powerful than medicine, or like, why or why not?
It's sort of like East meets West,
Hmm.
bringing the different ideas and concepts together. I don't know if I can't say that it's more powerful, but
Hmm.
I think it works really well
Hmm.
in the medical setting and the hospice setting. When a music therapist uses the right music for a patient, it really helps in that process of healing, as you call it, or helps with the patient being able to express themselves if they need to do that. Because sometimes it's just it's finding the right song or the right way of helping a patient express themselves. Sometimes talk music works better than talk therapist because the music stimulates the conversation or helps
Hmm.
a patient emote. But we like to work together, with our social workers and our psychologists and the doctors and nurses, so that we have a good outcome with the patient.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think that music can also, like, I feel like when people think of like medicine or like treatments, they usually think of like pills, I guess, or like some other kind of like medicine. I feel like music is not something that comes to mind, but I feel like music and medicine have a lot of similarities because like both can, I guess, like in a way, heal mental illnesses, also like possibly like physical diseases, as well as help like alleviate the soul, I guess. So I feel like
Mhm.
music and medicine have a lot of similarities as well as differences, which I think is super cool and interesting. Like you don't think of music, like people think of music as something more like people think of music something more as like something you just like do, like whether it be listening or singing, but not something that can actually be compared to medicine, I guess, in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think to help with that is, a lot of you think of music education and you think of music therapy. And, so in music education, you talked about the choirs. If you're, I did a lot of choral work, and in the choral work, you're working towards the end goal, right? You're working towards the product, whatever that is, the performance in front of an audience. And in music therapy, when you're using music as the tool, you're not necessarily working towards the end product. What you're really focused on is the process throughout the therapy session, and depending on what diagnoses you work with, that process might be different and the outcomes might be different. Whether you're working with children, working with individuals that have dementia, you're working with someone with Parkinson's, you're working with a behavioral health group, they all have different processes. And you use music to help facilitate those goals, whatever that they might be.
hmm. So, talking like expanding on music and its kind of like benefits, this is kind of like a bigger question, but do you believe that like music therapy can be used to help, I guess, like alleviate with the current mental health crisis? Like, not like completely solve it, but just like kind of help it in a way, like help alleviate it?
Yeah, I do. If you think about, obviously the mental health crisis, it has been going on for a while, but I think COVID really brought it
Hmm.
to the forefront, but probably exacerbated it a little bit because so many people were homebound, shut in, and isolated. And music, you can have isolating experience with music, but usually if music is facilitated by a music therapist who's trying to help people express themselves, uh, you can use music to help engage people within, a lot of times if you're doing work in behavioral health, you're going to be working with a group because you try to reach the masses, right? And as opposed to doing just individual work, you can do individual work, but usually in a hospital setting, you get hired to help facilitate a group. And there you try to get people to express themselves when they might not otherwise do that, or play an instrument. And it's really powerful when you do music making in any kind of group, but especially behavioral health group, when people aren't engaged or talking to each other, and all of a sudden you bring a group of people together and you bring instruments, and you might do some drumming or some in the moment improvisational music making. So everything that music therapists do, I always say, is non-musician proof. If you're going to work with a group, you have to be able to get everybody involved, even if they're not a musician, so that the experience can be successful and everybody feels good about what they're doing.
Yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
agree with a lot of the things you said. And I guess like kind of going off of that, like how do you see the trajectory of music therapy like years from now? Like do you see the field expanding or
Yeah, no, I do. I think, right now, I think we're experiencing a music therapy shortage. And so we're all, looking for hiring music therapists because the demand is there. And the demand has gotten higher than the number of therapists we have in the field. And so it's exciting that it's there, but it's also hard, if you can't find the therapist that you're looking for. And so it's a really a great time to get into the profession and work in the field. What we're finding, when I first started, we were generalists. We would work with any kind of population, but as we learn more and more, through the sciences and through education and through research, then the therapists want to become more specialized. There's some therapists that just like to work in hospice and medical settings. There are other therapists that particularly want to work with children that have been diagnosed with autism and all the neuro diverse clients that there are in that arena. It's huge, right? Or some therapists might just choose to work with older adults. And no matter what population you work with, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to know. When a music therapist goes through school and they do their internship, we had an internship program for over 25 years, and music therapy interns are with us for 6 months at a time before they can sit for their national boards. What we have found is that music therapists of this generation have to know 12 decades of music or be able to find it really fast, because they could be working with someone that was born in the 1930s, but also someone that was born yesterday, right? And so it's a huge, first of all, you look at the decades, then you look at the diversity of the music and what that brings. And then if you work in an area like San Diego, where you have so many different ethnicities, then you also have to learn some of the cultural music, and so that you can relate to the people you work with. So it's huge. It's a huge task for therapists to, first of all, learn the music, but then how to use the music with a broad range of people.
I think that gives me a lot of insight into how, I guess, like how, like, not like genuine, but like how much work has to go into a music therapist. But I guess my next question, I was kind of thinking, I know you said that the field of music therapy, or I guess like in your case, it kind of went from generalized to specialized. Are there any other kinds of trends, I guess, that have changed in music therapy, like versus like when you first started versus
Oh, yeah.
now?
Yeah, when I first started, most therapists worked in state institutions, whether they were, at that time they called developmental, or in mental health. And then the federal law passed, and then you started working with children that were in school systems because of the IEP, the Individual Educational Plan. And then in the 90s, there was a big movement towards two movements. One was towards working more in the medical setting and the hospice setting. And then secondly, private practice. When I started my practice, MusicWorx in 1987. I think there might have been about 5 other agencies across the country. And, so it was very new, and there was nobody really to talk to, just maybe that person or that person, and get ideas. So it was, through trial and error, trying to figure that out. And now private practice is one of the fastest growing areas in the music therapy profession, probably one of the larger employers of music therapists in our profession.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
that's true across the country.
I think
Yeah.
like the growth of like private practices during like when you first started, it kind of shows like what you talked about before, like the field of music therapy expanding. And I know like before you talked about how I guess like there's a rise for music therapy
Mhm.
and music therapists and how there's actually a shortage right now. Why do you believe that I guess like music therapy is has been growing at this rate
Well,
or
it took, I think, it took a while for the research to catch up. And then, so that, more and more different professions, started believing in the use of music as a tool and as a therapeutic tool, especially. And so I think that just started catching up. And then when people in an area start seeing a music therapist work with a particular group and they see the outcomes and how fast sometimes that happens, then that too has grown interest. And so that's, when I first moved to San Diego, there was no music therapy in any hospital. None, right? And now we have maybe 3, well, probably have 4 hospital systems that have music therapists in their hospitals, whether they're employees or contractors to the agency. And then hospice, back in the early 90s, there were very few people working in hospice, very few. And all of a sudden, every hospice wanted to have a music
yeah.
therapist on their team, whether they hired them as an employee or as a contractor to serve the patients that were out in the community.
Mhm. I know in our school, like we used to not, we had to do volunteering, but we have to do it through the school. So our school, they used to never offer any kind of like hospice or like music kind of related volunteering, but now they just recently added like this volunteering event where if you know how to sing or play an instrument, or like even if you're not a musician, you can go to a hospice and just like kind of like play music for them like in the background. So
Mhm.
I think that's kind of like a testament to like what we were talking about before, like just like the field growing and expanding. And I know, like, with all your experience, do you have any, like, heartwarming stories about music therapy that you would like to share?
Oh my gosh. When most of my work these days is administrative, running, both companies and doing everything that I need to behind the scenes. I used to be able to tell you stories left and right, when I was out in the
Yeah.
field. But I would say, one there, I mean, there's the music therapists share stories all the time in our team meetings about experiences they've had with clients. I would say one that comes to my mind that I'll always remember was when I was referred to see a patient in an ICU, and the patient was non-responsive, and the doctor really thought it'd be worth trying to see if music could stimulate him to come out of his comatose state. And so I walked into the ICU, and the nurse said, "Well, he hasn't responded. What are you doing here?" Right? Sort of response. And I said, "Well, just let me give it a shot. The doctor wants to see if the music can trigger something within the patient." And so I happened to have, at that time, I used a lot of different instruments, but I had an Q chord. It's like an electronic auto harp, but it is a very cool instrument, but it's lightweight, and you can just put it up to the bed, up against a patient, and there's that vibrotactile stimulation that you get from the other side when it's playing. And so I put that up against him, and then based on his age, I decided to I play Sentimental Journey, because I thought that was a song that
Nice.
he might know and remember because of his age. And so I started playing that, and I sang the song, "Gonna Take a Sentimental Journey." I don't know if you know that song, but it's a song that was very popular.
Mhm.
many, many years ago. And so I played through the whole first verse and chorus. And then he turned to me and he said, "That was beautiful. Can you play it again?" And the nurse was, on the other end of the room. She was just shocked because he had not responded. He had not said a word. He just was non-responsive before I came in. And whatever it was, whether it was the stimulation from the instrument, or if it was the voice, or if it was the song, was enough to bring him out. Now, does that happen with every patient that we go to see that's in a comatose state? No, but it was a trigger that worked for him. But it was great. Then of course I sang it again, and he even mouthed some of the words to the song with me. But we have lots of those kinds of experiences in the hospital setting. And then, if you're working with children, sometimes children that are homebound or shut in, and if you're doing end of life support, the therapists have some really incredible, poignant moments with the child and the parent. Especially if they're working, doing a legacy project. Some of the legacy projects we use with children that are end of life, we have a stethoscope, and so we have the heartbeat. So we record the heartbeat, and then we write an original song, facilitated by the parent and or the child, depending how old the children are, on top of that heartbeat. And then that becomes the base for like a video production of the family working together to create this song.
Yeah, that story about like I guess like the comatose patient, like I think that kind of just shows like how powerful music is. Just like the
Yeah,
fact that like the patient wouldn't respond, but then suddenly he hears this like song and
yeah.
like this popular song and he just like instantly responds like that. I think that to me is like so amazing.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, it's sometimes if you can find the music within the
Mhm.
general age
Yeah.
range that you thought he was when that song was big, then you can probably hit the right music, get the right music. So I don't know if it was the song, I don't know if it was the stimulus against him, but it worked, and I'll never forget that, especially the
Yeah.
nurse's expression, seeing this patient come out of the coma.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess my last question would be like,
Sure.
what advice do you have for people trying to pursue like the career of being a music therapist?
I would suggest that if try to shadow music therapists in the profession. Try to, like what you're doing is volunteer. For example, we with Resounding Joy, we have a really robust volunteer program, and we don't train people to become music therapists, but we bring volunteers in to work with a music therapist, or we train recreational music strategies, and we give those to the volunteer to go and work with a client, so that you get some of that experience. If you're lucky, there's a music therapy at your school, then sit in on a 1 hour lecture, and or interview people and watch videos. Whatever you can do to surround yourself with it to see if you like it. And then maybe not just one population. Like I said, more and more therapists are specializing. And you might have an idea that you want to do work in the school setting, but you might discover that you really like working with older adults, and or vice versa. So just try to get as much exposure as you can before you go into the field, to make sure you're heading in the right direction with your
Hmm.
career.
Yeah, that's definitely like really good advice. I
Yeah.
think, I guess like I'm kind of interested and I feel like that I would really, that advice like really resonated with me.
Where do you go to school?
I go to school in Houston.
Oh, okay. I think there's a music therapy program in Houston somewhere.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'll look into that.
yeah, I can let you know. But no, it's great. But I know there's definitely music therapists in Houston,
Hmm.
and for you to be able to either meet with or observe or do some volunteer work for.
Hmm. Yeah. I feel like we had a very interesting conversation today. Thank you, Dr. Royer, so much for coming on and speaking with me. It was such a pleasure. And thank
Absolutely.
you to everyone else at home watching, and thank you so much. I will see you
Yeah.
next time. Bye.
On Come back again.